Welcome EDSP 678Q students to this PowerPoint presentation called What Can You Not Do? And as you'll recall, this is one of the organizing questions for our class over the next 5 or 6 weeks. Now we'll start off with a story. When I went to get a doctorate at Indiana University in the fall of 1990, my very first class was called Curriculum Theory, and the professor was Dr. Norm Overly, who was quite a curriculum theorist in his day. And there were about 40 people in the class. 6 of us were educational leadership students, and of course we thought we knew what we were doing. We were all former administrators who thought we had a handle on the way schools work. The rest of the class was filled with these curriculum theory students, most of whom were philosophers and dreamers and the kind of people who write books about the way things ought to be in schools. And of course, we, as leadership people, knew what things were like in school. So Dr. Overly was going over the syllabus, as professors always do at the beginning of a course, and he said, your first assignment is for next week. You need to write a 2-page essay, and the topic of the essay is, how do you know? Well, I was a, former central office person who directed curriculum and ran special ed. And I, along with my colleague special ed leadership students, kept waiting for the rest of the sentence. How do you know what? How do you know how to play baseball? How do you know how to write? How do you know what your classmates' neighbors are? How do you know? What Dr. Overly was introducing us to was a philosophical term called epistemology. Of course, all the curriculum theorists, when Dr. Overly said, how do you know? They went, oh, yeah. They were already in their heads thinking up epistemological answers. And so that got us into epistemology. Now, I didn't know what epistemology was. I was an administrator, not a philosopher. And we didn't talk in terms of epistemology much back in West Virginia. And so I had to learn about epistemology. And epistemology is the study of how do you know? Epistemology addresses what we claim to know and how we know it. Epistemology asks questions like, what do we know? How do we come to know what we know? Can we justify what we know? Beliefs come from what we know. How does that happen? How do we come to know what we believe? When we know, we gain knowledge. What's the difference between knowledge and truth? Is knowing absolute? Is it universal? Does everyone know? Or is it relative? Does knowledge depend on the circumstances, on the context? And of course, in that leadership, we talk a lot about things depending on context. Those are really questions about how we know, how we come to know it, and how we justify what we know. So I engaged in a process to try to understand how I know. And in order to do that, I had to engage in a philosophical inquiry, which is what you're engaging in this course. What do I mean when I say, I know who to vote for. I know I love lasagna. I know I'm getting old. Okay. What do I mean when I say I know? Well, some elements of knowing, this isn't just a black and white yes or no, up or down question. It has phases. It has elements. When I say I know, I'm saying I think this is true. Well, I believe it's true. Well, what do you believe? What makes it, just because you believe it, how does that make what you know true? Your knowing is aligned with your understanding of reality. How do you understand reality? Is there only one reality? Are there multiple realities? You know, philosophy is all about trying to figure out what reality is, particularly as the way we communicate about it. What is reality? What is your reality? Often when you say, I know, somebody says, well, provide me some reasons or some evidence to support that belief that you have, that you know something. Well, and of course in schools, that's happening all the time these days. How do you know that science of reading is a good way for kids to learn how to read? How do you know that memorizing their times tables is a good idea for students? How do you know that critical race theory is a bad idea for the curriculum? What reasons do you have? What evidence do you have? And what constitutes a good reason or good evidence? These are questions of epistemology, of how do I know? And sometimes when we say I know, we're saying it because we feel certain that it's true. We have an emotional investment in believing that we know about something. Okay. How do you support that, given that it's emotional? How do you show that your feelings about whatever it is you're talking about are valid? My feeling is that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go to the Super Bowl. I know the Steelers are going to go to the Super Bowl. How do I know? What do I believe that supports that contention, that claim, as we call it in philosophy? I feel certain about it. How do I support that? Okay. This is the stuff of epistemology. And as I said, epistemology, knowing, leads to believing. What does it mean to believe something? I believe all kids with disabilities should be educated in the regular classroom. I think that's true. Absolutely. Tentatively, it depends. Our beliefs are not always based on evidence. Sometimes we believe just because we believe. Beliefs vary from person to person and from time to time. Beliefs change. And so we are always engaging in an inquiry into what our beliefs are and how they interface with the beliefs of other people. What we believe, in general, guides what we do. If we say we believe something, we are likely to act on it. And when we act, we are likely to say, I acted because I believe this to be true. Now, this can get us into trouble, as we all know from recent concerns in this country about things like critical race theory. There's this thing called implicit bias. Okay? You can actually believe things without really even knowing you believe them. And you can act on them without even knowing you believe them. This is a large part of the discussion about race and gender these days. So what does it mean to believe is an important question. And as you write in your platform and in your journal, you should be exploring your beliefs and why you believe them. What evidence do you have that they are valid, that they are useful? Have you challenged your beliefs? Somebody probably needs to challenge my belief that the Pittsburgh Steelers go win the Super Bowl. Okay? And when we have that challenge, that's when we engage in dialogue, conversation, conflict, all sorts of ways of engaging with one another socially, some positive, some negative. Now, epistemology, when we talk about how do we know, we also talk about values. And the discipline of philosophy has a subdiscipline called axiology. And axiology looks at value and value judgment. How do we define value? Okay, if I value schools in a democracy, how am I defining that value? Is it valuable in and of itself? Or is it valuable based on its usefulness or its consequences? Money is valuable because of its usefulness. And we all value money because we have to. Love may well be valuable in and of itself. Okay? But we have to figure that out. Is valuing objective? Are there objective reasons to value something? Or is it subjective? Does it depend on context? Okay. How does culture influence value? And we know that culture influences value. Okay. What people believe about the value of certain things in France is different from what they are here in the United States. Culture influences value. And this is something we also need to think about when we think about things like family, children, schooling, disability. Are values universal? Are they absolute, just like beliefs and just like knowledge? Or do they depend? As you all know, one of my answers to many of your questions is, it depends. Because I believe that things depend on context. I struggle with the idea of universal values. Okay? It depends is an important question. Now, axiology, then, when we talk about our values, we're talking about things that are important or worthwhile or significant to you. And when you talk about your values as an administrator, you communicate those values through your identity, through the ethical frameworks that you choose, the ethical decision-making that you do, and our interactions around our values then form the social norms by which we operate in our society. Value guides what you do, just like beliefs. Beliefs are different from values. Okay? Beliefs have a more emotional basis for them often. Values are usually instrumentalized. But like beliefs, values vary from person to person and from time to time, and they change. We will fight for our values, okay? And we will debate our values. Now, ethics is a subdiscipline of axiology, okay? And ethics focuses on moral value. You know, there's economic value, there's moral value, there's social value. Ethics focuses on moral value. Its essential question is, what makes this right or wrong? What makes this good or bad? And as you'll recall from Shapiro and Stepkovich, there are three major schools of thought about ethics. the ethic of justice, the ethic of critique, and the ethic of care. And then the fourth frame or paradigm that they offer is an ethic of the profession. And what we'll be doing throughout this class is helping you articulate your ethic of the profession. Okay? Now, in your leadership platform, you're going to articulate your values, beliefs, and ethical precepts personally and professionally. Because one thing we know is that you cannot, as hard as you try, you cannot separate the personal and the professional. We are in a human business, and the personal and the professional interact all the time. Okay? So if you have some preferences in your personal beliefs, values, knowing, those preferences are going to come across in your professional interactions. Now, some of those preferences might be discriminatory. You might have some racial preferences, some gender preferences, some ethnic preferences. If you live in the United States of America, you've been living with these preferences for a long time, and they are often deeply hidden. Well, in your platform, you're going to explore what your personal and professional values and beliefs and precepts are, and what they will mean for your special education leadership throughout your career. Okay? In your journal, you are going to be articulating your purposes and goals as a special education leader. And when you do that, you have ventured into something philosophically called teleology. Teleology is the branch of philosophy that deals with purpose. Teleology tries to explain the ends that we seek. Not the means, not how do we get there, but what is it that we are pursuing in life, personally and in our profession. So that comes down to these three big questions. What's your purpose in life, personally and professionally? What are your professional purposes and goals? You're going to look at the big picture, then you're going to narrow that down into what are my professional purposes and goals? And then, how will those purposes and goals guide your actions? This is a teleological inquiry. And remember, teleology is concerned with end purposes, not causes. Not how you get there, but what is the end you're trying to accomplish. Okay? So, as you work on your organizational leadership journal and your special ed leadership platform, and remember the two go together. This is a thinking and writing process. You will be engaging in a personal and professional philosophical inquiry. And as you engage in discourse, that is, as you read, think, listen, and write about organizational theory and special ed leadership, you will consider the questions we've asked in this presentation and articulate who you are and what you want to become as a special education leader. Okay. So who are you, and how does that emerge in your work now and in the future? We'll be discussing all of this in Wednesday night office hours, in class, and I hope you'll join me in this inquiry. It is a fascinating one. But it's really, really hard. It takes deep thinking. And that's tough work. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in class.